You know what's wild? Sometimes the craziest stories turn out to be true. For years, people have been whispering about something so explosive, so unbelievable, that the palace dismissed it as pure fantasy. Tabloid nonsense, the kind of thing you'd roll your eyes at while waiting in the checkout line. But here's the thing about whispers. They don't just die. They linger. They multiply. And sometimes they erupt into something the world can't ignore anymore. Tonight, we're diving into a revelation that's sending shockwaves through one of the world's most iconic institutions. We're talking about DNA evidence, hidden diaries, secret flights, and a story that rewrites everything we thought we knew about a beloved princess. This isn't speculation anymore. This is real. And it's happening right now. So buckle up, because what you're about to hear isn't just another conspiracy theory. It's a carefully buried truth finally clawing its way to the surface. And trust me, by the end of this, you'll understand why the palace has been terrified of this moment for decades. Let's start at the beginning. The world fell in love with her the moment she stepped into the spotlight. Young, radiant, painfully human in a world of rigid protocol. She wasn't just a princess, she was hope personified. But beneath that megawatt smile, beneath the carefully orchestrated public appearances, there was something else. A sadness that couldn't quite be hidden. Pauses in her voice during interviews that felt heavier than they should. Moments where her eyes seemed to carry the weight of something unspeakable. People noticed. Of course they did. But what could they do? Point at shadows? Question a fairy tale? So they didn't. They watched, they wondered, and they moved on. The official story was always enough, until it wasn't. Everything shifted when a message arrived without fanfare or warning. Quiet, almost too quiet. Someone, somewhere, had held on to a piece of history that the world was never meant to see, a personal item, something intimate, something that once belonged to her. And this person didn't want fame, didn't want attention. They just wanted answers. So they did something extraordinary. They submitted this heirloom for independent DNA testing. No palace involvement, no press releases. Just a sample, a laboratory, and a question that refused to stay buried any longer. When those results came back, everything changed. The match wasn't vague, it wasn't questionable, it was direct. Maternal DNA confirmed with scientific certainty. Suddenly, all those dismissed theories, all those brushed-off rumors, they stopped sounding crazy. They started sounding deliberate. Like survival. Think about it. This was a woman who learned how to navigate the most scrutinized existence on the planet. A woman who understood that every move, every word, every breath was monitored, analyzed, weaponized. If she needed to hide something, really hide it, she'd find a way. And maybe, just maybe, she did exactly that. Friends who once laughed off the rumors started hesitating when asked about them. Old acquaintances began remembering conversations that never quite made sense at the time. A cryptic warning here. A coded journal entry there. References to fear, to protection, to a love that had to be hidden at all costs. Now, let's talk about 1983. Spring of that year, specifically, something shifted. Her schedule, normally packed with royal engagements and public appearances, suddenly cleared without explanation. Events were postponed. Commitments were canceled. The official line was exhaustion, maybe a cold, nothing serious. But those closest to her felt something different. This wasn't rest. This was orchestrated absence. And then, for 48 hours, she vanished completely. Not figuratively, literally. She disappeared from public view in a way that felt calculated, controlled. Years would pass before anyone understood why. But when aviation records eventually surfaced, tucked away in a leaked file, they revealed something shocking. A private jet departed from a royal airfield and landed quietly in Switzerland. The flight was logged under royal authorization, but the passenger name? It wasn't hers, it was a pseudonym, a fake name that appeared nowhere else in any travel database. But the initials matched, the time frame matched, the security presence matched. She'd been flown in secret to a secluded facility in the Alps, the kind of place known for medical discretion and elite clientele. The kind of place where records disappear and staff sign agreements at the state level, the kind of place you go when you need something handled without questions. Then came the testimony that nobody saw coming. A former palace staff member, now in his late 60s, stepped forward anonymously through a documentary team investigating royal secrets. His voice shook. His words were measured. But what he said sent shockwaves through anyone listening. She left, he explained. Not for rest, not for a retreat. And when she returned, she wasn't the same person. He was told very clearly to forget what he saw. So he did. For decades. Until he couldn't anymore. Until the weight of the secret became heavier than the fear of speaking. Meanwhile, during that exact same period, something else was happening. Her husband was unusually distant. No statements, no acknowledgments, no visible concern. He didn't visit, he didn't call, he didn't mention her absence at all. Instead, he threw himself into royal duties with almost mechanical precision, dodging any personal topics like they were landmines. Was he unaware? Or worse, was he part of ensuring it stayed buried? The motive starts to crystallize when you consider who she'd reportedly grown close to. A man whose identity remains shrouded but whose existence represented everything the monarchy couldn't tolerate. Someone considered far beyond the acceptable limits of royal association. A relationship that, if it resulted in a child, would create something the establishment simply couldn't control. Because here's the thing about that institution. It runs on lineage, on bloodlines, on centuries of carefully maintained succession. A child born outside those rigid parameters wouldn't just be inconvenient, it would be uncontrollable. A threat to the image they'd spent generations constructing, a wild card they couldn't afford to play. When journalists tried to trace her medical history from that period, they hit walls. Files were sealed, names were redacted, and curiously, records under a foreign alias bore notes in handwriting eerily similar to her own. Notes signed only with a single letter, the first letter of her name. If all of this were coincidence, it would be remarkably convenient. But too many pieces align now. The timing, the disappearance, the facility, the flight, all pointing toward a calculated erasure of something too dangerous to exist. Let's talk about that relationship for a moment, the one the world never heard about. In the early 80s, long before her marriage publicly unraveled, she formed a connection with someone whose presence, within palace circles, was brief but unforgettable. A foreign diplomat, charismatic, elegant, stationed in London temporarily. He wasn't royal, he wasn't British, and for an institution that had just begun molding her into their perfect princess, he was utterly unacceptable. But behind those gilded walls, something real blossomed, something dangerous. Their meetings were secret, always arranged through whispers and intermediaries, a coded phrase, a borrowed room far from watching eyes. She wasn't reckless, she was desperate. Desperate for warmth, for something genuine, for someone who didn't try to control her every move. He listened, he understood, and more than anything, he saw her as human, not as property. Their connection deepened quickly, dangerously. And when the palace learned about it, their response was swift and brutal. The diplomat was reassigned without warning. One day he was there, the next he was gone, shipped abroad under the guise of routine rotation. Those close to her knew the truth. She was devastated. The woman who'd mastered public composure began crumbling behind closed doors. Staff reported sudden emotional breakdowns. Friends recalled quiet sobbing in the middle of otherwise normal conversations. One confidant later said something chilling. She never mourned a breakup so deeply. Not even her final split from her husband. Because this wasn't just a fling. In her own words, this was the only time she considered leaving everything behind, but the stakes were impossibly high. Whispers began circulating that the romance had led to something more serious. A pregnancy. Just the possibility sent tremors through the palace. Because a child from that union, with no royal blood, with mixed heritage, wouldn't just complicate succession. It would rupture it entirely. In a rare interview that's since been censored, someone from her inner circle said something haunting. There was a moment she had to choose between love and the crown, and she didn't choose the throne. That single line has echoed for years, but only now does its full meaning become clear. If she chose love, and love created life, then that life still exists somewhere, hidden, erased by royal command, but now emerging from decades of secrecy with proof impossible to deny. So what happened to that child? How does the most famous woman in the world give birth in secret? How does a newborn simply disappear without a trace? No birth certificate, no records, nothing. The whispers started as early as 1984. There was a curious absence of official medical documentation, a shift in her emotional state. Some said she was suffering from depression. Others sensed something deeper, darker. Behind the glamorous facade, she was grieving. But for what? Or for whom? The theory that the baby had been removed through forced adoption, or even something more sinister, was long dismissed as fiction. But now, with multiple testimonies emerging, that fiction has taken terrifying shape. A former midwife, now in hiding, me forward under oath. Her words were simple but devastating. She delivered a baby under armed security in 1983. The mother was veiled, but she recognized the voice. She was told it never happened. She was paid to disappear. Her voice cracked. Not from guilt, but from carrying that truth for so long. What mother would allow such a thing unless she had absolutely no choice? Throughout her life, she spoke in symbols. In interviews, she'd reference a piece of herself that had been taken, a void that no amount of duty or motherhood could fill. She often described feeling incomplete. In hindsight, these weren't just poetic expressions. They were coded cries for help. Investigators have now turned their attention to adoption agencies operating under royal patronage during the 80s. These institutions, publicly praised for humanitarian work, may have been used to discreetly place a royal child into a life of anonymity. One such agency has since closed. Its archives were mysteriously destroyed in a fire. The timing? Just months after her death. Then there's the money trail. Financial analysts uncovered a quietly growing offshore account tied to a code name only used in royal correspondence. Funds deposited annually, untouched, protected by the same legal firm that managed her estate. The recipient remained unnamed, untraceable, until now, because something else surfaced, something impossible to dismiss. A locket once belonging to her, confirmed through photographs and auction records, now worn by someone in their 30s living in Central Europe. Inside that locket, a strand of hair, and a note. 6 words in fading ink. "Forgive me for letting you go." DNA testing on that hair matched her genetic profile, and it matched the person wearing the locket. The person now at the center of a storm the monarchy can no longer outrun. This wasn't a fairy tale gone wrong. This was an erasure, a surgical removal of a life from the official narrative. And the world, once content with palace stories and staged portraits, is demanding answers. For years, this person lived an unremarkable life in a quiet town. Educated, well-spoken, always sensing something about their origins didn't add up. They were told they'd been adopted. But there were no papers, no birth certificate, no infant photographs, just fragments. A caretaker who wouldn't answer questions. A guardian whose story changed mid-conversation. Then, on their 29th birthday, a safe hidden in an old villa revealed the first key. Letters. Handwritten, tender, signed with a single initial. "My light," one read. "I did this for you. One day you'll understand." Those words weren't just emotional, they were prophetic. The letters spoke in riddles, referencing a life lived in shadows, hinting at sacrifice made under crushing pressure, and tucked between the pages was that golden locket. Inside, blonde hair wrapped in silk. When DNA analysts matched that strand to a confirmed artifact once worn by her, displayed in a museum archive, the result was immediate and absolute. Maternal match. 99.98%. Investigators who saw those results were shaken. But even more jarring were the private photo comparisons. Side-by-side images taken decades apart revealed not just resemblance, but uncanny, almost identical bone structure. The eyes, the mouth, the tilt of the head. To anyone who saw those images, there was no doubt. This wasn't coincidence. This was blood. The individual has chosen to remain unnamed for now, though sources hint at mixed heritage. A legacy that doesn't just threaten succession, it could redefine it entirely. Their legal team has begun making inquiries through international channels, preparing a formal case for recognition. But what they want isn't a title, it's truth. As they've stated clearly, this isn't about power. It's about identity. And while their story just begins to surface, the waves it's sending through the establishment are seismic. A child once erased now demands to be seen, not for fame, for the justice their mother never received, for the truth she tried to leave behind like breadcrumbs. But while this person seeks truth, the palace scrambles into damage control, and not everyone inside agrees on what should be done. Enter two royal figures pushed to the brink. The current queen consort, furious at the potential erasure of her legacy. The future king, torn between loyalty to his mother's memory and fear of destabilizing the monarchy he's destined to inherit. Behind palace doors, the conflict is volcanic. She never imagined this day would come. After decades clawing her way from scandal to queenship, she now faces the terrifying prospect of being written out of history. Not by the public, not by the press, but by a ghost from the past. Insiders say she exploded behind closed doors, accusing the king of failing to contain the crisis. She allegedly screamed that her predecessor was ruining her from beyond the grave, that this child, this outsider, threatened everything she'd fought for. Her rage wasn't just personal. It was strategic. With each revelation, her public favor eroded like sand in a storm. Whispers spread through palace corridors, not just about her reaction, but about what the family may have known all along. A leaked memo dated 1984 appears to confirm the royal family was aware of a sensitive birth, requiring complete discretion. The wording is vague but damning. Lawyers scrambled to discredit it, but former staff members have begun speaking out, hinting at conversations long buried under legal threats and silence. The implication is clear. The cover-up wasn't an accident, it was policy. At the center stands the future king, the son, the heir to the throne, a man now forced to choose between blood and institution. Sources describe him as deeply shaken, haunted by the thought that his mother's vague warnings had always meant more than anyone dared imagine. In a private statement to his staff, he reportedly said something cryptic. If it's true, it changes everything and nothing at all. A man divided. Then came the most shocking whisper of all, a secret meeting. According to insiders, he agreed to meet with the alleged heir at a private countryside estate. No cameras, no statements. Just two people connected by a mother the world never stopped mourning. What they said remains sealed in silence. But afterward, he canceled 2 public appearances. Some say he needed time, others say he needed to prepare for what comes next. Meanwhile, public sentiment has shifted dramatically. People once skeptical have rallied behind the secret heir. Online campaigns demand answers. Protesters gather outside royal residences with signs reading, "Her child deserves the truth, the Queen Consort's approval." Elle ratings have plummeted. She's seen not as a leader but as an obstacle. And in the background, the king remains eerily silent. No comment, no appearance, nothing. And in that silence, speculation grows deafening. What is he hiding? How long can he hide it? Just when the palace thinks it's contained the blaze, another bombshell erupts. A forgotten diary, a cryptic entry. One phrase that changes everything. Found deep within a private estate, the king's personal writings from 1983 offer the first admission from within the family. What he wrote wasn't just disturbing, it may reveal why that child had to disappear. Tucked inside a sealed chest, a leather journal bore no official stamp, just a date scrawled in hurried ink. March 1983. Most pages were mundane, ceremonial schedules, fleeting thoughts. But midway through, buried between notes about gardens and sports, was an entry underlined twice in red. It read, "The unbearable truth lives in her eyes. An heir I can never claim, a future I cannot allow." The discovery sent investigators into crisis mode. Every line dripped with quiet panic. He wrote of sleepless nights, of her withdrawn silence, of conversations with unnamed advisors who offered solutions that made him sick. One sentence stood out in chilling contrast. "The crown is not a cradle for chaos. I was told to choose. This isn't just a hint at knowledge, it's a confession. Speculation has exploded over what he meant by an heir he could never claim. Was it a child he believed wasn't his, or a child he was forced to deny for the survival of the monarchy? The ambiguity leaves room for both horror and heartbreak. If the child wasn't his, the betrayal would have cut deep. Bah! If it was his, and he was forced to give that child up, it paints a picture of a man crushed beneath institutional weight. Legal analysts are examining whether the journal can be admitted into formal inquiry. Though not a criminal confession, the language suggests obstruction, emotional coercion, a cover-up less about protecting family and more about preserving a throne. One lawyer stated plainly, "This isn't just about what he knew, it's about what he was willing to let happen." The most tragic aspect isn't the fear or pressure, it's the resignation, the acknowledgement that he felt cornered by protocol, poisoned by fear. Words suggesting a man no longer controlling his own story, surrendering to forces more ruthless than love or truth. Now that the diary sits in legal hands, its implications stretch beyond scandal. It challenges the moral authority of the entire institution. It casts shadows not just on his past, but on decisions that shaped her fate and the life of a child buried in silence. But even royal confessions can't stop the tide, because now one woman holds power to shatter everything. She was silent until now. As pressure mounted and the monarchy teetered, the current Princess of Wales stepped into the storm. But her message wasn't what anyone expected. For weeks, the world waited. The scandal had engulfed every corridor of power. Yet one voice, perhaps the most trusted of all, remained absent. Known for composure and loyalty, she watched quietly as secrets shattered the pristine veneer. She said nothing during the DNA revelations, nothing when fury exploded through headlines. Even as the future king stumbled beneath impossible choices, she stood still. Until then, ow! Her address wasn't made from a balcony or filtered through official channels. It came through a recorded statement, unembellished, raw, unmistakably personal. She looked directly at the camera and said words no royal had dared utter. The truth should never threaten love. It should illuminate it. And with that, the dam broke. She didn't confirm, she didn't deny. But every word carried the weight of understanding, of solidarity with past pain. She spoke of a legacy silenced too soon, of a family still reckoning with truths buried in shadow. Then, in a sentence that shook foundations, she acknowledged a member of this family who has long been lost. There were no names. There didn't need to be. She didn't cry. She didn't falter. But within her voice was the tremble of someone caught between duty and conscience. Without attacking, she laid bare the cost of silence. Without accusing, she revealed how far the institution had strayed from what it claims to protect. There was a moment, barely more than a breath, when she said, "We do not erase history to protect the crown. We honor it by facing it." That line now headlines newspapers worldwide. Observers quickly noted a clear divergence from the Queen Consort's position. While one fights to maintain the old order, the other has gently turned toward something else, something more human. A monarchy that remembers it's made not of titles but people. A quiet reference to the mother who still watches over us was widely interpreted as a nod to the past, to the emotional link between two women that no palace protocol could destroy. The impact was immediate. Polls show dramatic surge in public support. Social media flooded with admirat. Ion. She was hailed not just as a peacemaker, but as the true heir to a compassionate legacy. In a family wounded by denial, it was her honesty that began restoring trust. She didn't take sides. She didn't rewrite the past. She simply let the truth breathe. But as dust settles, the ultimate question remains: what happens now? The DNA is real. The heir exists. The monarchy has been rocked to its foundations. Britain stands at a crossroads. Will the crown adapt, or will it fracture? For the first time in modern history, the question of legitimacy isn't just ceremonial, it's legal. Constitutional lawyers are already dissecting ramifications. Can this individual, born outside palace gates but carrying royal blood, claim a title, demand property, or more provocatively, assert any right to succession? The answers are murky, buried in centuries of precedent and protocol. But one truth remains undeniable. Silence is no longer sustainable. Public pressure mounts daily. Every day without formal acknowledgement only fuels speculation. Protesters gather outside royal residences, demanding the monarchy face the DNA findings. Even the most traditional voices in government are beginning to whisper the unspeakable. Is this the beginning of the end, or the start of something entirely new? Historians are divided. Some argue this is the most destabilizing event in generations, calling it a constitutional earthquake that will echo for decades. Others suggest it's an opportunity, a reckoning long overdue. They argue that what once disqualified someone from inclusion, lineage outside wedlock, non-traditional heritage, secrecy, should no longer define the future. But that idealism clashes violently with the weight of tradition. Meanwhile, the world watches. The media storm has transcended borders. From every continent, headlines scream of the hidden legacy. Social media has turned the alleged heir into a symbol of suppressed truth, a living reminder of what the monarchy tried and failed to bury. And now all eyes turn to one looming event. The heir is preparing to speak. Sources confirm a public statement is being written, reviewed, planned for global release. Nobody knows exactly what will be said, but the gravity is undeniable. This isn't just a claim to identity. It's a collision course with one of the world's oldest institutions. A storm decades in the making is reaching its peak. In this moment, a voice silenced in life, manipulated in death, is finally rising through the one thing the crown never accounted for. Truth. The truth she carried, the love she protected, the legacy she left scattered in letters, in lockets, in whispers passed between friends. All of it has found its shape in a child once erased. The secret is out, and the crown may never be the same again. So there you have it, a story that's been hiding in plain sight for 40 years, finally breaking into the light. Whether you believe every detail or you're still skeptical, one thing's certain: this conversation isn't going away. The questions are too big, the evidence too compelling, the implications too profound. If this story grabbed you, if it made you think, made you feel something, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, because trust me, this is far from over. Drop a comment and tell me what you think. Are you Team Truth? Or Team Protect the institution? Either way, I'll see you in the next one. Stay curious. Observers quickly noted a clear divergence from the Queen Consort's position. While one fights to maintain the old order, the other has gently turned towards something else, something more human. A monarchy that remembers it's made not of titles but people. A quiet reference to the mother who still watches over us was widely interpreted as a nod to the past, to the emotional link between two women that no palace protocol could destroy. The impact was immediate. Polls showed dramatic surge in public support. Social media flooded with admiration. She was hailed not just as a peacemaker but as the true heir to a compassionate legacy. In a family wounded by denial, it was her honesty that began restoring trust. She didn't take sides. She didn't rewrite the past. She simply let the truth breathe. But as dust settles, the ultimate question remains. What happens now? The DNA is real. The heir exists. The monarchy has been rocked to its foundations. Britain stands at a crossroads. Will the crown adapt, or will it fracture? For the first time in modern history, the question of legitimacy isn't just ceremonial, it's legal. Constitutional lawyers are already dissecting ramifications. Can this individual, born outside palace gates but carrying royal blood, claim a title, demand property, or more provocatively, assert any right to succession? The answers are murky, buried in centuries of precedent and protocol. But one truth remains undeniable. Silence is no longer sustainable. Public pressure mounts daily. Every day without formal acknowledgement only fuels speculation. Protesters gather outside royal residences, demanding the monarchy face the DNA findings. Even the most traditional voices in government are beginning to whisper the unspeakable. Is this the beginning of the end, or the start of something entirely new? Historians are divided. Some argue this is the most destabilizing event in generations, calling it a constitutional earthquake that will echo for decades. Others suggest it's an opportunity, a reckoning long overdue. They argue that what once disqualified someone from inclusion, lineage outside wedlock, non-traditional heritage, secrecy, should no longer define the future. But that idealism clashes violently with the weight of tradition. Meanwhile, the world watches. The media storm has transcended borders. From every continent, headlines scream of the hidden legacy. Social media has turned the alleged heir into a symbol of suppressed truth, a living reminder of what the monarchy tried and failed to bury. And now all eyes turn to one looming event. The heir is preparing to speak. Sources confirm a public statement is being written, reviewed, planned for global release. Nobody knows exactly what will be said, but the gravity is undeniable. This isn't just a claim to identity. It's a collision course with one of the world's oldest institutions. A storm decades in the making is reaching its peak. In this moment, a voice silenced in life, manipulated in death, is finally rising through the one thing the crown never accounted for. Truth. The truth she carried, the love she protected, the legacy she left scattered in letters, in lockets, in whispers passed between friends, all of it has found its shape in a child once erased. The secret is out. And the crown may never be the Sam E again. So there you have it. A story that's been hiding in plain sight for 40 years, finally breaking into the light. Whether you believe every detail or you're still skeptical, one thing's certain: this conversation isn't going away. The questions are too big, the evidence too compelling, the implications too profound. If this story grabbed you, if it made you think, made you feel something, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, because trust me, this is far from over. Drop a comment and tell me what you think. Are you Team Truth or Team Protect the Institution? Either way, I'll see you in the next one. Stay curious.